Well, something crazy happened, fellas, and now we gotta dive into it to figure out exactly what is going on here. So, in case you don't know, Electronic Arts, or EA, that's the home of Battlefield, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, Madden, Need for Speed, and more, has officially been bought out by foreign investment groups for $55 billion, making the sale of EA one of the largest buyouts in history. This sale will make EA go private, meaning that EA will no longer have to answer to a horde of public investors when it comes to their decisions with the company. Instead, EA will now be controlled by a select few, and the goal, according to what I'm reading, is to improve costs while also cutting down on what's not working, and that's the key here. Because the biggest buyer in this is the PIF, or Public Investment Fund. This is an organization created in 1971 by the Saudi Arabian government. The PIF is the central sovereign wealth fund of the entire country, which manages, as of 2025, around $925 billion in investments alone. It is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's primary investment fund that is being used here, which then allows Saudi Arabia to move past, as a nation, from their over-reliance on oil currently for their insane wealth in the future. This was all started with investing in infrastructure and then also energy sectors, and eventually in 2015, the PIF then sought out entertainment and sports instead. Now, they, alongside others, own the entirety of Electronic Arts, as PC Gamer states here. EA strikes a $55 billion deal to go private in a Saudi-backed buyout just a week before the launch of Battlefield 6. Yeah, so the journalists are pissed about this, and it's pretty easy, to wonder why. I mean, a quick Google search as seen here on Wikipedia shows that the Saudi Arabian government is, well, heavily anti-LGBT and believes in less rights for anyone who identifies that way. And when you're EA and have studios like BioWare under your belt, which made the terrible Dragon Age Veilguard, which is full of LGBT stuff, you can imagine the panic that's probably going on right now over there. But there's also two other groups that solidified this deal as well of EA. One of them is Silver Lake. That's another private equity firm. And then the third and final person in this that kind of controls everything is Infinity Partners, who was founded in 2021 and ran by Jared Kushner. That's this guy on screen here. He's the son-in-law to President Donald Trump. So basically, to round it all up for you in a really nice and neat package so you understand, Electronic Arts is now owned by a bunch of anti-LGBT Saudi Arabians and conservatives, pretty much. And how is the gaming sphere reacting to this? Well, it's not good, let's put it that way. For example, we have Kotaku with their article titled, "The Internet Reacts to EA's $55 billion sale to some of the worst people around." And of course, they use the elusive man in the article as their main photo, because he's a white guy who is pro-humanity over that of aliens. I see what you're doing there, Kotaku, you sniveling morons, I see you. But anyway, one example given as seen here is Luke Plunkett, a guy who is pro-everything woke and works with Kotaku, who also said this: "This feels catastrophic in ways few other big industry deals have. Of course, it's bad if you're pro-DEI slop like Luke has been in the past." Then you also have people like Chris Bratt of People Make Games, another person who is very anti-conservative, very anti-Trump, and very anti-Gamergate, who calls this acquisition, as you can see, mega grim. Gee, I wonder why, Chris, you would think that way. Another industry type would also say this: "Well, this effing sucks. I really don't think people realize just how bad the Saudis and Trump's nephew controlling the stable of IP held onto by EA is for the art form. If you think mainstream gaming was stale before, now it's going to be owned by the most conservative people on the planet too." So let's stop there for a second, okay? Stale? The Western gaming industry has been increasingly stale for years now. Almost any game made by these types has been games that push LGBT themes first and foremost and attacks anyone who doesn't think like them. Like, let's just look at EA, okay? Which feels right given they're the main part of the story, obviously. How their properties have been constantly mismanaged and ruined by pandering to these DEI policies. Battlefield had massive controversies when it came to Battlefield 5. Remember when they tried to push female soldiers in World War II? And then told people if you don't like it, don't buy the game? Like, I'm not even kidding. As seen here, they said that. I'm not even mincing their words. Like when Patrick Soderlund said just that when people were, confused as to why female soldiers with like missing arms and stuff were being depicted in World War II. For God's sakes, they even put a woman on the cover of Battlefield 5, which felt even more like a big WTF moment given what it was all about. It made no sense at all. Let's also go look at Dragon Age Veilguard. I mean, do I even need to explain that one at all? I don't think so, but BioWare lost so much after Veilguard failed. And to this day, they have ex-Veilguard devs that are begging for work on social media, one of whom you will hear about later on in this video. You'll see what I mean. And then of course we also have The Sims, which EA also owns. That's a game series that pushes tons of LGBT content in it almost constantly. So these franchises have done nothing but really push pro-LGBT stuff since forever. And for the most part, it hasn't really worked or made profits. Maybe The Sims at least. I actually think in terms of anything LGBT making money at EA, maybe the only one that actually does make money for them still is The Sims, but everything else has been pretty much a disaster. So claiming that this means EA will become stale, not probably true at all. If anything, what this actually really means is that the people who now own and operate EA can, if they want to, which I assume is the case given who owns it now, the ability to push those elements out of these games if their core mission objective is to make money, which it absolutely is. Because if you just spent $55 billion on something, you probably want that thing to make you money to recoup those costs, and understandably so. Even Jason Schreier, one of the biggest advocates of DEI in games, I mean, he works for Bloomberg for crying out loud, who pushes this stuff constantly. He said this via Blue Sky. It's official, EA is going private. The leverage buyout will be financed by a staggering $20 billion of debt, which likely means some aggressive cost cutting is ahead for EA in the coming months and years, and he continues. A lot of people are understandably focused on the Saudi Arabia and Kushner part of this, but the far bigger immediate impact will come from the new private EA being on the hook for $20 billion in debt. This could mean mass layoffs, more aggressive monetization, and other big cost-cutting measures. Yes, which means EA will now be forced by their new owners to cut out anything that doesn't work for them or isn't making them the money that they need, which means that pretty much anything that pushes DEI is going to likely be torn from the root and then thrown in the bin, because players are not buying things attached to that unless it's, I guess, The Sims, like I said before. So the obvious concern, or maybe expectation depending on who you ask now, is what does this mean in the long road for EA and all of its games and then some? If the PIF, a Saudi Arabian investment fund, now owns EA, could they enact their belief systems on these properties? Yes, absolutely. Think of how globalists have pressed investments into many game companies and more to completely transform them over years from being normal games or entertainment, which was meant to be for everyone pretty much, to now being we hate you if you don't like LGBT themes in games or if you don't think like us in record time. The people who push that sort of stuff into games have been met with blowback because people don't want to buy those games, meaning these games lose the money, as Veilguard famously did. So this Saudi push could mean the direct opposite, that they don't want any pro-LGBT content in any franchises owned by them. And they could go as far as to demand removal of any LGBT themes in any games that are currently in development. Mass Effect, for example, is a great example of this where it could affect them heavily. The Saudis might go, being gay is not what we want anymore and we own it, so now you have to remove it from your game. They could also look at games trying to push body types over genders and go, no, that goes against our policies, you must revert it back to male and female only. And if you enjoy the content, please consider all the YouTube stuff from liking the video, leaving a comment and more, thank you, but it could also mean the Saudis could come in and see, let's say, a non-binary operator in a game like Battlefield, and they could think that it should not exist anymore, and then they'll just remove it, and there's genuinely nothing that the devs there could do anything about it. Is it censorship to a degree? Yeah, it is, but this is the end result of what I've been saying for years on this channel already. I've said in many previous videos that game companies and developers and more, they have two roads ahead of them. They could either tone down their nonsense and try to make games that don't alienate or attack their audiences. Basically, make games like they used to be in the 2000s and the early 2010s era. And they could still exist as they are, hire who they want and be relatively autonomous more or less. They had this option, but when given it, they decided to steer hard left and then hire activists and instead implement the usual slop into every single game that they made. This led to cratering sales, studios closing, employees laid off, the whole thing, which means now that a lot of these studios, they believe that they could push for pro-LGBT content forever, for the rest of time, and they are now being met with a very harsh reality, because now they're being forced down the other road instead, which is now people who are actually completely anti-LGBT in Saudi Arabia, who literally owns you now. They can't force you to remove anything that you believe is important to your games, all because you refused to give players what they wanted when you actually had the freedom freedom to do so, which made your studio, and by proxy your parent company, weaker both financially and socially, which then led to your parent company panicking about the dropping profits because places like, BioWare and more believe that body types and pushing trans stuff was more important than, I don't know, making money. Then now the Saudis with their deep pockets from all the oil and whatnot, they now own you 100%. Case in point, the easiest way to put this is like this. You guys did this to yourselves. You had the power to stay independent, relatively speaking, but you couldn't help yourselves, and you kept pushing for more and more DEI and wokeness and so on, and now look where it's gotten you. You pandered so hard to the sun, you got bought out by people who believe that gay things just shouldn't even exist. Like, what did these types of activists think was the plan here? What was the end game? It was never going to work out the way that they intended. They thought players would just buy the slop forever and never question it. Instead, they maybe got 2 or 3 years of pure propaganda freedom, and now the adults are back in charge again, and they're going to enact their policies down on you hard. As another typical yes man that Kotaku featured also said this, as you can see. This is Mass Effect, Dragon Age, The Sims, and every other title that might possibly be even the slightest bit queer getting, dead. Yeah, pretty much, but again, your own people allowed this to happen because you refused to make games for players, but instead your own little cult inside your own studios. You even had Patrick Weeks, that's the guy who created the character Tosh in Veilguard. You all know the character, which by the way, my laptop keeps autocorrecting Tosh to trash, which honestly feels correct as well. Had this to say about the buyouts. Buyers, so your games, guns, and football, yes. EA, mostly games and football, yeah. Buyers, no gay stuff, no politics we're not going to like. EA, definitely not. Hey, could you give me 1 sec? I just need to shut down the studio real quick. It's kind of incredible that Patrick Weeks is this mask off, and this is one of the guys that's begging for work, by the way. That makes sense since he was fired and laid off from BioWare last year after Veilguard completely bombed, which he wrote, by the way, but the fact that he openly just said that no gay stuff or politics is allowed anymore, yeah, Patrick, no more, it seems, at EA at all. Because your people pushed that so hard into Veilguard and others that you literally went so woke, I don't know how else I can say it, that you went broke, that your parent company had to deal with the financial disaster that you created by pushing your agenda onto people that didn't want it. And now because of your inability to rein in your personal politics into the media that you helped created, you actually made a sinkhole at EA that will now swallow all the people who think like you, which will now never allow any of that stuff in EA's or Dragon Age's or Mass Effect's futures pretty much for the rest of time. Again, I would feel sorry if these franchises weren't already ruined, but I ran out of that empathy long ago. These activists caused this to happen. How else am I supposed to put this? If Dragon Age didn't get ruined and flayed alive by people like Patrick Weeks and more, maybe EA would have had the financial stability to resist the literal Saudi Arabians from buying them. But you clearly did not care, did you, Patrick? No, instead you decided it was a good idea to push for characters like Tosh and more, to focus 100% on having a non-binary character side story instead of, making a Dragon Age game. Now if the Saudis and Kushner want a new Dragon Age, that will be completely and totally devoid of any political nonsense whatsoever if they deem it to be so. They can now say, no more body types, there will be just no more gay romance options. They will make Dragon Age a Mass Effect like how the Saudis view the world. Men are on top, women are not, and gay people can't exist to them. I'm not saying I agree 100% with that ideology, but I'm just telling you that's likely what's going to happen now due to this new ownership that people like Patrick Weeks and more helped, gain the power that they did. But we really need to come to the conclusion here that this meltdown that these types are having is cause of their own hubris. You could have had future LGBT games if they just reined themselves in and met the players halfway, sort of like how Larian Studios did with Baldur's Gate 3, where they didn't push that stuff on you, they gave you the option to see it or not, and if you didn't want to see it, you didn't have to, but it could still be there, and they made lots of money and sold like 10 million copies plus. But no, instead you got rid of that choice, and you went so far off the deep end that the only logical conclusion from a business standpoint was to course correct the entire sinking ship. You guys did this to yourselves. Now, of course, these same Saudi groups already owned 9% of EA before this all went down, and the DEI and stuff and more still existed then. Although the argument there could be that they didn't have enough power to really vote in their beliefs over the games that were being made then. But now, Absolutely. Kotaku also highlighted another tweet which said this: BioWare, you gotta escape, you gotta leave now. Someone please buy BioWare before EA hands it over. Well, likely that's not gonna happen actually, because let's say EA does sell BioWare. It doesn't mean that they need to sell the IPs. They own Mass Effect, Dragon Age, separate from BioWare as a company. They could, however, now license out those IPs to studios that actually want to make great games in those universes that I would love to see. I would love a Dragon Age game made by a studio completely out of left field, like let's say CI Games. They did Lords of the Fallen. That would be an interesting combination for a Dragon Age game if you ask me. But either way, if EA sold BioWare and those IPs to some other studio, doesn't mean that it would still do well. If they just pushed more pro-DI slop, got rid of your player choice, it would just be history repeating itself again. The only company that could probably do it well is probably Larian, but I don't think they would even want to do that, to be honest with you. So what people need to realize is this group wants to make profits first, which means they have to do what makes actual money, which is not what they were doing before with these sorts of franchises. This reminds me actually when another Saudi Arabian prince-backed group bought SNK, the home of games like King of Fighters and more, a few years ago. As seen here from GameIndustry.biz, it's actually the PIF again that owns SNK now, well, 96% of it anyways. But the Saudi prince that did that buyout a few years back was because he is a big fan of SNK's games himself from his childhood, and he specifically wanted to retain the identity of SNK and not have it be ruined by Western slop nonsense. So he's such a fan, he literally bought up 96% of the company to protect it from that sort of DI slop, and I expect a similar outcome with EA here as well. Battlefield will likely be more base than ever before. Doesn't mean that female characters won't exist or be playable, they likely still will be. They just likely won't be pushing for, you know, another non-binary operator or whatever else as an equivalent. Instead, Battlefield and other franchises like it will instead be forced to focus on what makes them money and money alone, which is catering to the fan bases of these games 100%. Now, I know some people online are saying, aren't we just replacing the LGBT stuff with Saudi-led stuff now instead? The answer so far is we don't know yet. It's still too early to say 100%, but based on previous, acquisitions by the PIF, this has not really been the case. They usually just make the companies they own, that they make them focus on just catering to the people who buy the products that they bought. And really, that's what EA kind of just needs. No more activists, no more everything is a rainbow or whatever, just solid, great games that run well at release and a focus on authenticity with these franchises. Hopefully, this leads to consultants that are also sent by the PIF to ensure that these franchises aren't going to be financial bombs in the future too. It would likely be in their best interest to send a team to, say, BioWare to comb through the new Mass Effect game and ensure that there is nothing there that could cause controversy or damage to the public image of EA and now the PIF by association. Andrew Wilson, by the way, will still stay as CEO of EA despite all of this, and he did send out an email to employees where this all happened, as you can see here on screen. To paraphrase what he said, it's the usual CEO talk about calming nerves. Don't worry, you're okay. This is a good partnership. This is for strategic growth in the future. Our mission at EA is to make good games, blah, blah, blah. You know the usual stuff. But he does say somewhere in that this does not change things at EA and they're still committed to whatever it is that they're currently making. But if you know anything about corporate acquisitions and mergers like this, it's never really the case. This always 100% means layoffs are incoming because these new owners are going to have their guys comb the records, see the financials, and decide whether what is being made for how much and for how long is worth it in the long run. I fully expect layoffs at any studio that pushes DEI heavily and any studio currently suffering or not operating at full capacity to get axed as well. Because again, the PIF, that's the Saudis, they don't care about things that don't make them money. They just want to make more money. As cold-hearted as it sounds, that's what it is. It's business. In a way, all the people crying saying now there won't be any LGBT games or whatever at EA, I mean, they can only blame themselves in this moment. They paved the road themselves that this group will now drive on to take these people to their own execution, if you will. Their beliefs and ideas will be destroyed and removed. And again, this is because they refuse to meet the people who buy these games halfway. They became way too power hungry, way too activist driven. I mean, how can I feel bad about this? Knowing that these sorts of people were willing to tank entire studios and destroy fan favorite franchises just to push propaganda like this. Look, the point of all of this is that these investors clearly believed that going private would make them more money than staying public as they were now. And if being a public company would have been more beneficial, then they would have stayed that way. Instead, this is what is happening now. This is all due to the hubris of activists and the lax behavior of those who allowed this to fester for so long within Electronic Arts as a company. Now the whirlwind is being reaped, and the adults are in charge now, and whether these types are happy with that, they must now live with the fact that their actions allowed this to happen, and their actions alone. So if any of these activist developers or whoever else wants to point the blame at anyone as to why their movement likely won't flourish as it once did at EA or something, they need only look in the mirror. They did this to themselves, but what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Is this good or bad for EA or games in general? Thank you for watching, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.